Australia is not just a country, it is a continent shaped by isolation, distance, and time. Stand in a modern Australian city and you see glass towers, highways, and crowded harbors. But rewind tens of thousands of years and you find deserts, forests, and ancient footsteps across an untouched land. Long before ships appeared on the horizon, people were already here. For more than 60,000 years, Aboriginal peoples lived across the continent. They followed the seasons, read the land, and passed knowledge through song and story. The world's oldest continuous culture was already thriving. The land was not something to conquer, it was something to understand. Every river, desert, and mountain carried meaning. Spiritual stories connected people to the landscape around them. For thousands of years, the outside world barely knew Australia existed. Empires rose in Asia, Europe, and Africa. Trade routes crossed deserts and oceans. But this distant continent remained largely beyond their maps. Then, sails appeared on distant waters. In the 17th century, Dutch explorers reached parts of the coastline. They named the land New Holland, but the continent seemed harsh, dry, and far from profitable. Most ships left as quickly as they arrived. The land remained mysterious and distant. Yet curiosity about the southern oceans kept growing. Soon another expedition would change everything. In 1770, a British ship sailed along the eastern coast. Its captain was James Cook. He mapped the coastline and claimed the territory for Britain. He named it New South Wales. The decision would reshape the continent forever. Britain needed a distant colony. Its prisons were overcrowded. The empire looked toward the far side of the world. In 1788, a fleet of 11 ships arrived in a quiet harbor. The voyage became known as the First Fleet. Convicts, soldiers, and officials stepped ashore at Sydney Cove. A penal colony was born. The early years were brutal. Food supplies ran low. Crops failed in unfamiliar soil. Survival was uncertain for the fragile settlement. Gradually, the colony stabilized. More ships arrived, carrying prisoners and supplies. Free settlers began to follow. Small settlements spread along the coast. But expansion came with heavy consequences. Indigenous communities faced disease, displacement, and violence. Ancient societies were forced to confront a new and devastating reality. The frontier became a place of conflict and loss. Meanwhile, explorers pushed deeper into the continent. They searched for rivers, fertile land, and safe routes inland. Many expeditions struggled against the harsh interior. The Australian landscape resisted easy conquest. The continent's center revealed endless deserts and dry plains. Water was scarce. Distance was enormous. Exploration often meant hardship and failure. Then everything changed in the middle of the 19th century. In 1851, gold was discovered in southeastern Australia. The news spread across oceans and continents. Fortune seekers rushed toward the gold fields. Ships arrived carrying thousands of migrants. People came from Europe, America, and China. The colony of Victoria transformed almost overnight. Tents and mining camps turned into booming towns. Gold created sudden wealth and rapid change. Railways expanded across the countryside. Ports filled with ships and trade. Australia was no longer just a prison colony. Cities grew larger and more confident. Newspapers, universities, and political movements emerged. The colonies began thinking about their future. A new idea started to take shape. Separate colonies considered becoming one nation. Debates about unity, defense, and identity grew louder. Leaders gathered to design a new political system. The goal was federation. In 1901, 6 colonies joined together peacefully. A new country was formed. It became the Commonwealth of Australia. a nation created through negotiation rather than revolution. But the young country soon faced a violent world. In 1914, global war erupted. Australia joined the conflict as part of the British Empire. Thousands of soldiers were sent overseas. In 1915, troops landed on the Gallipoli Peninsula. The campaign was brutal and unsuccessful. Thousands of Australians lost their lives. The tragedy left a deep mark on national memory. 2 decades later, another war arrived. During World War II, the Pacific region became a battlefield. For the first time, Australia faced a real threat of invasion. Cities prepared for air raids and attack. After the war, the country changed rapidly. Immigration programs welcomed millions of new residents. Factories expanded and industries grew. Suburbs spread around growing cities. Australia was becoming more diverse than ever before. Cultures from Europe, Asia, and the Middle East joined the national story. The population increased quickly. A modern multicultural society began to emerge. At the same time, Indigenous Australians demanded recognition and justice. Movements for civil rights grew stronger. Old assumptions about history were challenged. The country began re-examining its past. A major turning point arrived in 1992. The Mabo decision rejected the idea that Australia had been empty land before colonization. The ruling acknowledged Indigenous land rights. History itself was being reconsidered. Meanwhile, modern cities continued expanding. Skyscrapers rose above coastal skylines. Technology, finance, and education connected the nation to the global economy. Australia's role in the world was growing. The decision forced the country to confront its past more honestly. For generations, the land had been described as empty before European arrival. Now schools, courts, and communities began telling a more complex story. Voices long ignored were slowly being heard again. Modern Australia continued transforming at remarkable speed. Cities expanded into global economic centers. Harbors once filled with colonial ships now held towering skylines. Places like Sydney became symbols of a modern nation. Architecture and culture reflected this change. The white sails of the Sydney Opera House rose above the harbour. It became one of the most recognizable buildings on Earth, a reminder that Australia had stepped onto the world stage. Australia entered the 21st century deeply connected to global trade. Cargo ships left its ports every day. Minerals, energy, and food traveled across oceans. A continent once isolated was now tied to the global economy. Yet the land still reminds its people who truly shapes this continent. Bushfires can darken entire skies. Droughts test farms and communities for years. Floods can transform quiet rivers into unstoppable forces. Australia's story is one of contrasts. Ancient cultures and modern technology, deserts and skyscrapers, isolation and global connection. From Aboriginal songlines to modern cities, the continent has changed many times. People arrived from every corner of the world. Cultures blended across a vast landscape. Yet the ancient land remains at the center of it all. From desert pathways to digital skylines, Australia continues evolving. A land shaped by survival, migration, and change. A continent older than memory, yet constantly renewing itself, and the story is still being written.